So we are going to present you the web interface. So let me start first with this. We are going to talk about the input panel, output panel, settings, control parameters, and so on. To do so, we design an application which is a discovery application. I will click down in my bottom bar, and the discovery application is starting, and then I will click on it. So as you can see, it's extremely fast to load the web interface. What you see on the main interface, we have two tabs on the top, input, output tab, basically. For each room right, it's basically how we name the output channel. For each output, you can set the parameters for 8 inputs. So as we said, it's a matrix. So basically, you can set different levels from different input for each output. So let's take the output number 1, room left. You can basically rename the input on the bottom. What do we have? So we can name the input, we can name the output. We have a fader for each of them. You can go from minus 120 to plus 10 dB. So in case it's not enough, you can still use the trim. And the trim, you can go from minus 20 to plus 20 dBu. It will, for instance, you have a CD or any source with a consumer range output level. That's very handy. If you want to type in the value, you just right-click on it, and you can say, okay, minus 6 dB. That's it. You guys probably going to ask, why is this button? It's actually a link. So we will link all parameters except the fader. Why? Because if you set the output 1 as room left, you don't want the left and right channel going into output left. You just want a left channel. And the same. When we click here, room right, we're going to set this value right here. We're going to set the channel, let's say 0 dB. And in this case, you can achieve, let's say, stereo mix, even if the channels are linked. So as we discussed, you can set the trim by clicking the button specifying the value. Of course, if I want to try to specify 30 dB, you see, the system is not going to allow me to do it. I can set like minus 10, and those parameters are linked. You can enable the EQ by clicking here. They are obviously linked. Same for compressor, polarity, mute button, they are linked, the pad. So if you click the pad, you will be, in input, the input will be in line level. If you remove it, you will get the mic preamp. So we have the 48 volt phantom power. This is separate. For instance, if you have 2 microphones, one is a condenser microphone, the other one is a regular one, you need to set those parameters independently. So it's really depending on what you're going to do, but you could do it or you don't. It's really up to you. Then, okay, let's go for EQ page. If you click right here, you'll see you will come on the EQ page. You have 10 EQ parametric. As we discussed before, you can enable, disable the EQ, reset the value. Let's take the first one. Okay, let's say it's a high-pass filter. I can change the Q of the high-pass filter, change the frequency. Okay, if you do right-click, let's say 100 Hertz. Here we go. The Q 0.7, and then you can enable, disable this EQ separately. Not only the whole EQ range, but separately. and then you can graphically, set the EQ up to you. So it's also made for touch application. So I have a touch screen, so I can change the EQ myself, pressing on the touch, and or I can do it with the sliders this way. And obviously, I can reset the EQ. In addition to that, you can instantly select the input. So those buttons down there are shortcut. You can also use preset. So we define some basic preset for keyboard, guitar, and so on. And then if you want to access the compressor limiter, you just need to click here, and you can set the compressor limiter. It's enabled, so you can change the level. You can set the soft knee this way. You can change the compression ratio, attack, hold, and release. So it's a really nice sound compressor. And you can obviously enable, disable it, or reset the parameter, let's say. Let's close this. Okay, so let's have a look to the output. So what you see here, it's only for the analog out, as discussed previously. So I click here, I have a shortcut. I can set the value. I do right click, I can set 50 milliseconds. You can go up to 100 milliseconds. And you can change the unit, like feet, meter, or milliseconds, really up to you. And for output, as discussed before, we have EQs, we have compressor limiter, and delay. The EQs are exactly the same. We are currently developing the preset also for the output. So you will get in a new release preset for all the Sync Audio speaker range. It will be very handy if you want to quickly set up a PA system. You can use a regular amplifier together with the Dante box. Yes, you can use the Dante box as a mixing desk. Since you have phantom power for small band, could be handy. And set the preset for the output. That's a really cool feature. Okay, now we are on the output page. So you have the master level. If you link to output, in this case, you will link also the fader, because this is really making sense. You want to use those fader as the master fader. Same parameters like EQ, mute, polarity. You can change it. You have the same as the input panel. You have a shortcut. Keep in mind that there is no delay. As you can see, there is no delay for Dante output, since you can use a DBT4D4 for the main application, and remotely DBT04 is just for output. So you will link the 4 additional Dante output of the main processing device with the secondary device. So you will achieve 8 output. Okay, what's next? Here you can set, let's call it room 1. You can set the name. So yeah, it's obviously very handy to know that. Or as we can see, SQ 215 left, 215 right for subwoofer, or really up to your need. On the top right corner, you will see that the device is connected. Yes, for any kind of reason, you connect to the web page, and at some point someone disconnects the cable from the switch. You don't know it. You will avoid to lose time setting parameters, and in fact, those parameters are not integrated. The cool thing is, well, if you reconnect, you won't get into trouble, because you're gonna change the gain to very large gain because you don't hear what's happening, and you keep on increasing the gain, and at some point you reconnect. In fact, the parameters will be the parameters inside the device. So yes, it will avoid some hiccups on the field. Let's go back to input section. I just want to show off the help button. If you click on the top right corner, that's very handy because now you can go above each buttons or labels, and then it will explain you what it is, what is the purpose, and what you can do with it. So it's interactive help. We are going to show you how to set the parameters of the device. So what you see, you have the parameters icon on the top right corner. You just click on it. You're gonna see the general settings. So basically the Dante name, which is also the device name. As discussed previously, you can access the device name by typing in your web browser web_dbi-44.local. Local is to specify it on the local network. The web interface will show you the IP address. You can also type the IP address. It's also working. Subnet mask and the gateway. What we usually advise is to keep the DHCP on. If there is a DHCP server on a network, it's very handy to get the IP address. And if there is no DHCP server on a network, the device is going to take an IP address on its own, so using the auto IP protocol. You can lock the front panel. This is also cool for fixed installation or even on the stage. You will avoid someone touching the device with his foot and turning on off a button. You can also specify the behavior of the LED on the front panel. Always on, always off. So can be in a theater or in a venue and you don't want to see those LEDs, or you are doing an event during a sunny day, you want those LEDs. So basically you need them. So, and you have 3 options: always on, always off, or off after 2 minutes. If you do a settings, then you can apply changes, like always off or off after 2 minutes. I can click apply changes. Then the commands are sent to the device. If I turn off the DHCP, then I will be able to set the IP address. If I change the IP address, you have to remember that you need to use the discovery software to find the device on the network. Unless, of course, you know the IP address because you set it yourself. But let's say the device was set by someone else on the network with an IP address. You can always use some load default setting procedure to go back to the original settings. So don't worry, even if there is no button for IP address, you can still go back to the default settings. We're going to keep the DHCP on. The next tab is show. You can, let's say, modify the name by clicking here. Let's call it Sabri. That's it. Yeah, I click here. It was successfully saved. You can delete, you can record. So basically, let's say I load this show. Yes, I want to load it. And then I will go into the application, change the parameters, and then once I go back to show page, I can save the settings. I can also delete the show. Or you can add an empty show by clicking here. That's it. You can store up to 10 shows. Okay. So what else do we have? We have the GPIO button. So this is very handy to, let's say, on the installation product to connect any kind of multifunction button or a potentiometer, an LED, whatsoever. So if you want to do the settings, you can just click here, and then you can set the type of input. So if you click on GPIO tab, you will reach the GPIO settings. So basically, as you can see, we have GPI 1. So we can set the input for this. We click on this. So let's say we want to connect an analog input. So let's connect analog. You have to enable a specific task. You can go up to 5 tasks. So let's enable task 1. So we're going to specify it's on the output channel 1, and we are going to control the gain. As you can see, we have a very basic potmeter, 5 kilo ohm, 10 kilo ohm, 20 kilo ohm, it's okay. We have the ground, the output in the center, and the 3.3 volt, the power on the right-hand side. And everything is connected straight to the connector. So there is no additional requirement for that. Any kind of cables are good, like AC cable, 3 wires, or Ethernet cable, or cable used for automation, like the one used for KNX protocol. And so what you can see now on the interface, we can control the output using the potmeter. It's very easy. If you want to allow the user to control this, you can integrate this on the wall. And basically, you will allow the user to set the volume in the room, or an input, an output, or you can link this to several inputs, several outputs. It's really up to you. So it's quick and easy, it's cheap, and yeah, can allow you to do a lot of things. So the next type of interface we can connect to the Dante product device, we can connect a push button. Can be any type of tag switch or momentary switch button. That's okay. So as you can see, so what we have to do, we have to connect 2 wires to this button, and we need a simple resistor here. So that's the only thing we need to do. Can be any kind of basic resistor. We'll go into the settings, and we will specify that it's a pulse, because it's not rocker switch. It's a momentary switch. We specify that we turn on the action 1, rising, falling edge. So this is really up to you, depending on how you're going to cable the button. What we're going to do, we're going to set the output, and we're going to set the mute. So we can do this with several things. We can also set to toggle an output. So you can, for instance, connect an external electric screen for remote control. So you can, let's say, turn on off any kind of devices, external devices, with those output. So we're going to close this and close this. And then, as you can see, we have a mute action with this switch. Of course, you have to use a high-quality switch. Otherwise, you can have some issue on the long run. So please get in touch with the SyncAudio support for advice. But that's very handy if you want to mute on and off the output. So as I said, it costs nothing. So just a switch, a resistor, and you can integrate this anywhere you want. And same as the analog potentiometer, you can connect it with any kind of wires. There is no specific requirement. So you can click here if you want to connect a standard switch on-off with a fixed position, not a flash switch. So you have to set the button as a logic state. So it will either follow or do the opposite of the, let's say, status of the switch. Of course, you have to enable the task 1, or from 1 to 5. Basically, you can set if it's input, output, or GP out, which channel you want, and what type of action you want. So basically, it's, most of the time used for mute action, or phantom power, or something like that. You could technically set this as a phantom power and together with the action of a GP out, which is an LED. So on a panel, you install an LED, you install the button, and you can turn on something. Or what you can do, like, okay, GP out or input or output. So there's multiple things you can do. Let's just turn off. So again, always use high quality switch. So, and then you can mute the output, and if you activate, then you will unmute the output, or the opposite, really up to you. And this is using one resistor, 2 cables, a wire, that's it. So in combination with the button, we can actually set a second task, and this task will either follow or reverse the status of the button. So basically, it's an output, and we can set the output. So you can control an LED or electric screen, whatever you want. That's it. So it's pretty simple. So let's go back to the page. So it's muted, and then we can unmute. And as you can see, the LED is turning off. The next tab is info. Basically, you see the info. You see the serial number of the device, hardware revision, and firmware revision, as well as the web interface. It's two different things. You can have different firmware revision for, some improvement updates, and as well the web interface. Yes, for support or any kind of other information related to warranty, whatever. So it's quite handy. Next tab is firmware update. So you can click here, choose a file. So you will get a file. You can download it from the SyncAudio website, and you can click update. So we'll see the progress bar updating. I'm not going to do now because the software is up to date. But yes, you can use the web interface to update the device in the field. In case of trouble, basically, something bad happened during the upload of the firmware, cable disconnected, you don't know what could happen. So you can simply turn on the simple update page, as you can see in my presentation. So what you should do, you should press the button, pad 3, and turn on the device. Then you will access the simple update page, as you can see on the bottom left corner. And then you can choose a file. This is, let's say, the backup plan. And during upload, you will see all the LEDs blinking. And then the device will be updated, basically, and reset. So you don't have to be afraid of doing a firmware update in the field, because you have always a backup plan. If you don't have an update, but you think your device is corrupted for any kind of reason, or during the update you don't want to risk anything, you can always go back to the previous software. So continuously on the device, you have two software. You have the previous version, which is validated after the upload, and the new firmware. So if you want to go back to the previous software, it's quite easy. You press pad 2, you turn on the device, the LED will blink, and you will use the previous software as the main software. So you will never be in trouble in the field because of firmware update or any kind of problem that could happen to your software loaded on the device. You can also load default settings. As discussed before, someone previously set the IP address as a static IP address. You don't know it, you don't know how to access. You press the pad 1 button, and then in this case, you will see that the LED is turning on, the power LED in the front. When the power LED is turned on, you release the pad 1, and then the device will load the default settings. So DHCP is on, and you can basically, in this case, use the discovery application to find the device on the network.